My sister sent me a photo, a picture of my boyfriend sleeping peacefully. Next to it was a confirmed pregnancy diagnosis slip. Her tone was casual and calm. "I just want Lucas, nothing else." I smiled at the chat page, and in that moment, I knew, Savannah had also been reborn. In this life, she placed her bet on Lucas. In my past life, the one who was supposed to marry me was the young master of the Gu family, Cassian. But when my sister Savannah learned of the immense influence the Gu family wielded, she refused to let it slide. She made a scene, clamoring to replace me in the arranged marriage and marry Cassian instead. After the banquet, she even stripped naked and sneaked into Cassian's room. Although I didn't manage to throw myself at Cassian, this incident effectively cut off any chance of an arranged marriage between us. Our family favored the sweet-talking younger sister from a young age, while I, who was solely focused on studying, received only average treatment. After this little episode with the granddaughter, Grandpa agreed and arranged for her marriage into the Gu family. After marrying into the family, Savannah was dumbfounded. The Gu family's young master was a half-dead sickly boy, with one leg that was inconvenient to move, and his temperament was unpredictable. I, on the other hand, met my boyfriend Lucas, got married after a few years of dating, and started a business. Savannah despised Cassian for being disabled. Soon after marrying him, she began demanding a divorce. While my career was thriving, Savannah clamored to move out of the Gu family. Neither of the two families allowed her to act unreasonably and cause trouble, and they both advised her to live a good life. Instead, Savannah found a boyfriend outside, and the two of them spent their days fooling around, becoming a laughingstock in their social circle and bringing great shame upon themselves. The Gu family had no choice but to agree to the divorce. Who would have thought that after Savannah registered her marriage with her boyfriend Liam, she would discover that Liam was a fraud? Far from being the wealthy second generation he claimed to be, he was actually a scoundrel who indulged in drinking and gambling. He even had the bad habit of domestic violence. Savannah was already pregnant with his child at the time. She ran back to the Sue family, crying and saying she wanted an abortion. However, at that time, the entire Sue family was being snubbed in the social circle due to offending the Gu family, and they were overwhelmed with troubles. Savannah found that her grandfather, who used to dote on her, and her parents, who used to indulge her, had all grown impatient. "Since you're married now, you should settle down and live your life properly. What man doesn't have a few bad habits?" As soon as she returned home, she was beaten again by Liam. Liam told her to quickly pack her things. He had sold the house to pay off his gambling debts. Once a person is addicted to gambling, it is impossible to quit. In the blink of an eye, the house and car were gone. Savannah returned to the Sue family, covered in dust and in tears, begging her family for money. Once or twice, the family still considered her a member of the Sue family and gave her money to get by. But later, Liam learned that Savannah's family had a bit of money and decided to go all in. Now, even if the Sue family sold everything, they still couldn't pay it back. When Savannah came to the door again, she was turned away. Lucas and I happened to return, him dressed in a suit, me in simple, efficient business attire, both of us decked out in designer brands. The neighbors saw it and praised me for being capable. I helped my husband manage the company in an orderly manner, and he was also steady and family-oriented. I gave a faint smile and saw Savannah next to me. She was dressed sloppily, with a sallow complexion, and her eyes were full of resentment. Upon seeing me look at her, she rushed forward to grab my hair. "It's all your fault. I married that cripple in your place, so everything you have now should be mine." Lucas shielded me, his face filled with disgust as he had the security guards at the residential complex drive Savannah out. However, after Savannah returned home, she stopped Liam when he resorted to domestic violence again. "Aren't you short of money? My older sister Serena, do you know her? Her husband is incredibly wealthy. If you can kidnap her and find someone to extort Lucas, he'll pay you a huge sum of money." Liam looked it up on Baidu and found that what she said was indeed true. The businesses under my husband's and my name were thriving, and our personal assets were countless. And Liam was already a hoodlum who developed a drug addiction while gambling and had a bunch of shady brothers. That day, Savannah called me via video chat. Over the phone, she apologized to me through tears and snot, then started reminiscing about our childhood to evoke my sympathy. Finally, she asked me to meet her at a coffee shop for a proper talk, saying she wanted to divorce Liam and needed my help. Little did I know that Savannah didn't care about her own life anymore. She only wanted me to suffer, to die, to watch me fall into the abyss. I thought Savannah was genuinely seeking help, so I gathered a lot of divorce lawyer information for her and planned to meet her to give it. But just as I got out of the car, I was knocked unconscious from behind and dragged into another vehicle. When I woke up, I was in an abandoned warehouse. Savannah was staring at me with excitement, with Liam and a few accomplices by her side. "Serena, ha 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 ha, how does it feel to be on the receiving end?" "You deserve it," she laughed triumphantly, not noticing Liam's signal. As she was being tied up, she kept cursing, "Liam, what are you doing? It was my idea in the first place, why are you tying me up?" Liam smiled as he flicked the ashes off his cigarette. "With you joining in, our chances of getting the money are even better." Savannah panicked, but Liam ignored him, cheerfully leading the others out to gamble. Only one criminal remained, staring at us with a sinister gaze. Unexpectedly, that person was a mentally ill patient who went crazy that night, grabbing a knife and killing both of us. When I opened my eyes again, I had returned to the time when I had only known Lucas for a year. And Savannah and Cassian were not yet engaged. When Savannah suddenly said that she didn't want to marry Cassian, I began to suspect that she might have also been reborn. Now, months later, after receiving these messages from her, I became completely certain. Savannah has returned as well. For the past few months, I've known Savannah has been secretly trying to hook up with Lucas. Having been married to Lucas for years in my previous life, I know his every move like the back of my hand. His affair has no place to hide from me. But I not only didn't stop it, I actually went with the flow. Seeing Savannah show off about being pregnant with Lucas's child, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Because I knew that although Lucas might seem flawless on the outside, he wasn't a good person at heart. He was born selfish and cold-hearted, as well as arrogant and conceited. In my past life, I always held the lifeline of the company, which was why Lucas maintained his superficial obedience. However, he secretly hoped for my downfall so that he could take control of the company alone. This was also why, in my past life, Liam and his accomplices used such clumsy kidnapping methods, yet I waited in vain for rescue until my death. Lucas's cruelty went far beyond what I had imagined. With someone as foolish as Savannah meeting a Lucas like that, there's bound to be quite a show. The next day, Lucas called me. After a moment of silence on the phone, he asked, "Is Savannah your sister?" "Yeah." "What did she say to you last night?" I cut straight to the point, "She says she's pregnant with your child." "Congratulations, Lucas, you're going to be a father." Lucas, hearing my calm tone, asked, "Why aren't you angry?" I smiled. Why would I be angry about something I'd actually wished for? "Serena, I'm so sorry. Before, she took advantage of me while I was drunk. When she found me yesterday, I was completely stunned." Lucas was explaining, desperately trying to justify himself. "I'll make her have an abortion, Serena, please don't take it personally." I said impatiently, with Savannah's nature, "Do you really think she'll just let this go?" "I'll just wish you a happy wedding in advance, brother-in-law." I didn't understand why Lucas was still acting at this point. Could it be that there was still some laughable affection? Just as I expected, Savannah brought the matter up that evening at home, announcing that she was going to get engaged to Lucas. At the dinner table, she looked at me provocatively, wearing a smug expression, as if she were already living the life of a CEO's wife. I calmly smiled, raising my glass to congratulate her. That night, she cornered me in a deserted corner. "Serena, you've been reborn too, haven't you?" Savannah sneered, "In this life, you can never outdo me after all. Marry that sickly fool properly." I smiled and said, "Then you'd better keep a tight grip on your cash cow. Don't let him run off with someone else." If Lucas can be lured away by someone like Savannah, then anyone else can easily do the same to him later. Without my iron will and capabilities, can Savannah truly keep Lucas in line? A few days later, Savannah and I got engaged on the same day. She with Lucas, and I with Cassian. The engagement partner that the Gu family had in mind was always me, because I graduated from a prestigious university and have outstanding abilities. This is also why, even though the Su family is not a particularly large clan, the Gu family still approached us. Savannah regretted and refused to marry, leaving the Su family extremely apologetic. In front of the Gu family, they harshly criticized Savannah, which also served to save their own face. Even after being scolded, Savannah remained secretly delighted, believing she had completely escaped the tragic life of her past existence. Although the Gu family had some objections, Cassian was not in good health, and they wanted to find someone who could support and assist him. So they agreed. Cassian. He was dressed in formal attire, somewhat thin and frail, with almond-shaped eyes lowered, coughing intermittently. Despite suffering from a serious illness, it wasn't very obvious from his appearance. Because he was just so damn good-looking. I was a bit surprised. In the previous life, when I married Savannah, Cassian did not attend, using illness as the excuse. I didn't expect him to show up at the engagement banquet in this life. I didn't see him much in my past life, but I had a faint feeling that Cassian was not as simple as he seemed on the surface. However, since we had little connection, I didn't bother to investigate. The engagement banquet was the first time we met. But I still gave the Gu family and Cassian the courtesy they deserved, stepping forward to take Cassian's hand. His hand was cold and pale, feeling exactly as it looked. The moment I took his hand, the tips of Cassian's ears instantly flushed bright red. At that moment, I couldn't help but chuckle softly, suddenly feeling that marrying him might not be as bad as I had imagined. The two daughters of the Su family got engaged on the same day, with one of them even tying the knot with the young master of the Gu family, capturing the attention of people from all walks of life. Cassian once again appeared in the public eye. It was only then that I learned the young master of the Gu family had also been a remarkably talented individual several years ago, coming from an excellent family background. He had never abused the Gu family's influence, instead focusing diligently on his studies abroad. Who would have thought that not long after returning to the country, I would be in a car accident that left one leg disabled, followed by a severe illness that completely broke my health. When it comes to Cassian, no one can help but sigh. At the engagement banquet, I noticed many people glancing subtly at Cassian. I stayed by his side, witnessing many guests come over to exchange formal greetings, only to reveal pitying expressions as they walked away. Looking at Cassian's calm and indifferent expression, a sense of unease suddenly rose in my heart. Unable to resist, I stepped in front of him and asked, "Are you tired? Do you want to go back and rest?" Cassian raised his eyes to look at me and smiled as if nothing had happened. "It's fine, I'm okay. It wouldn't be appropriate for me not to show up at the engagement party. I find it somewhat strange, in our previous life, he wasn't even at the engagement party for Savannah." Just as I was thinking this, Savannah strutted over, holding Lucas's hand. "Sis, why are you two hiding here?" She looked at Cassian, unable to hide the glee in her eyes. "Is brother-in-law's body able to withstand staying outside? In the future, you should be more careful, after all, he is your husband." Savannah looked at me smugly, provocatively holding Lucas's hand even tighter with her other hand. Lucas's eyes flickered uncomfortably, and only after a long pause did he glance at me awkwardly. "Serena." I nodded calmly, as if to acknowledge the greeting. At this moment, a cheerful middle-aged man walked over. He raised his glass with a smile. "Happy engagement." Lucas's expression instantly turned serious. I also recognized him as the chairman of Qingyuan Group, a man of high status who held numerous projects. It could be said that anyone who establishes a good relationship with him could benefit from it. Savannah remained unaware and continued to boast proudly, "Brother-in-law, you probably didn't know this, but my husband used to have a relationship with my sister before." The smile in Cassian's eyes vanished, and he pursed his lips as he looked at me. I held his hand and calmly responded, there's no need to bring up the past. Isn't this Chairman Walter? Thank you for your blessings for us. Chairman Walter was also a shrewd man who could see the tension between these two engaged couples. He narrowed his eyes without showing any expression. Cassian, uncle doesn't have much to offer, but recently acquired a fine painting. I'll give it to you as an engagement gift. Cassian smiled politely. Thank you, Uncle Walter. Chairman Walter patted Cassian on the shoulder. And who are these two? He looked at Savannah and Lucas with puzzled eyes. Lucas, hearing Chairman Walt's question, quickly prepared to introduce himself with enthusiasm. Forget it, it's not important. No need to waste time, Chairman Walt chuckled, patting Cassian on the shoulder again. Uncle is leaving, but when you get married, I'll definitely prepare a big red envelope for you. After he left, Savannah pursed her lips and whispered, such politeness towards a cripple. They really have no eyes to see. Meanwhile, I noticed that Lucas's expression had turned grim, and he was already feeling some resentment toward Savannah. He scolded her with a shut up and then turned to Cassian with a smile. Cassian, Savannah is young and doesn't know any better. From now on, we'll be family, so let's look out for each other. Cassian didn't pay him any attention, instead gently resting his head on my shoulder. I'm suddenly feeling a bit dizzy. Let's go somewhere less crowded to relax. I smiled and said, all right. Before leaving, I also overheard Savannah remark, TSK, still the same sickly-looking ghost's behavior. Lucas angrily cursed, are you an idiot? Shut up. I curled my lips into a smile, listening to the argument behind me as I pushed Cassian away from the scene. Though it was only an engagement, under the joint urging of the Gu and Su families, Cassian and I had already moved in together. They said it was to help us build a good relationship. Cassian looked helpless, but still instructed the servants to prepare a bedroom for me. The bedroom was warm and spacious, with a style of decor that suited my taste perfectly. It was clear that he must have investigated me beforehand. I understood immediately, indeed, Cassian wasn't as simple a person as he appeared on the surface. But he did not harm me, on the contrary, he respected me and did not treat me with indifference. So I was more than happy to stay out of his business. On the first night after moving in, Cassian and I were completely honest with each other. I want to start my own company. I said frankly, I have a complete project proposal and investment risk forecast. I'm not telling you this to ask for anything, but to say that I may not be able to take care of you all the time as your parents hoped. But rest assured, from now on, I will fulfill my duties as a wife properly and will not do anything inappropriate. Cassian looked at my solemn and earnest expression and pretended to think carefully. I think I didn't marry you just to have another caretaker at home. He smiled at me, you are my future wife. Of course, I will respect and support your choices without limits. I stared at him blankly, feeling somewhat dazed. In my previous life, I told Lucas that I wanted to start my own company. Lucas said on the surface, let's work hard together. But in reality, he always implied, whether subtly or overtly, how other people's wives behaved, hoping to persuade me to return to a domestic life. Before I was kidnapped, Lucas tried every possible way to persuade those around me to get me to agree to go home and prepare for pregnancy at the most critical time for the company's development. So, for a moment, Cassian's words left me a bit stunned. Seeing me dazed, he waved his hand in front of my face in confusion. What's wrong? I snapped back to reality and looked at him blankly. Cassian couldn't hold back a laugh. What I just said was, if you need money, just contact Ethan. I shook my head and said, no need, I have my own funds. Unexpectedly, the man in front of me lowered his gaze. He grabbed my hand, his eyes full of disappointment. I'm your fiancé. If you won't even use my money, does that mean you don't like me? I blushed instantly. No, I didn't. This was, of course, a lie. I didn't even know Cassian before, so how could I like him? But Cassian seemed comforted by my words. I like you too. I have plenty of money, take it and use it as you please, invest it however you want. His eyes lit up, my wife is really amazing, she even knows how to do business." For a moment, I was so flattered that I floated back to the bedroom, feeling lightheaded. Only after lying down for a while did it dawn on me. Isn't Cassian a graduate of one of the top business schools abroad? When it comes to business, no one is more skilled than him. How could he praise me with such an innocent tone? Isn't this just like a postdoctoral researcher patting an elementary school student on the head and saying, "It's really amazing how you just correctly did addition and subtraction within 10? The next day, I woke up feeling gloomy and went to have breakfast. I saw that Cassian had already gotten up and was quietly reading a book in the dining room in his wheelchair. When he saw me come out, he put down the book and smiled, saying, "You're awake, come have some breakfast." At a glance, the entire table was filled with all my favorite dishes. Holding my chopsticks, I was utterly confused. Wait, is this the kind of lavish life Savannah has been living all along? Why on earth was she making such a fuss about divorcing Cassian, and even cheating with Liam, that sorry-looking liar? Chewing the delicious food in my mouth, I wondered if Savannah had some kind of mental health issue I didn't know about. With a beauty like Cassian and delicious food every day, even if you tried to drive me away, I'd still stick around. Cassian watched from the side and reminded, "Eat slowly." The kitchen made a lot. I restrained myself, chewing slowly and meticulously, then wiped my mouth and remembered I should probably fulfill some of my duties as a fiancé. Picking up the warm porridge from the table, I said, "Should I feed you?" Cassian opened his eyes wide, his ears turning red. I found it amusing. Without waiting for his response, I scooped up a spoonful and brought it to his mouth. A blush spread across the man's face as he slowly opened his mouth and swallowed. I was absolutely charmed. How could this be anything like the rumors outside, moody, sick, and psychologically twisted? This is simply adorable. After my conversation with Cassian that day, I began planning my own company. Thanks to the experience accumulated from my past life, everything progressed smoothly. I also used my memories to avoid many pitfalls that I had stumbled into before. In my previous life, my company was called Regent Chronicle Group. In this life, I directly used my initials to create SY, completely breaking away from my previous life. And soon after, Savannah and Lucas got married, with Lucas also starting to run a company. But unlike my previous life, where I could rely on the Sue family's connections and my own understanding to plan for him and manage the company's affairs, there was only a Savannah who knew nothing but eating, drinking, and shopping, dreaming every day of living the life of a wealthy lady. At several business dinners, I noticed Lucas looking increasingly haggard. The company's development has also been far less smooth than in my previous life, stumbling along the way. I also heard that Savannah and Lucas recently had a big argument. It seems that Lucas cheated on Savannah with his own secretary while she was pregnant. After being caught red-handed by Savannah, she went crazy and nearly beat the other woman to death. The incident was quite a big deal. Soon, just like in her previous life, a small company went bankrupt around this time. They had developed a new biotechnology product but lacked the funding and business experience. So they wanted to sell the product patent. In my previous life, I secured the patent for this product, bringing tremendous profits to the company. It was also from this moment that the scale of my and Lucas's company expanded further. This matter filled Savannah with envy for a long time, and she now knows it all too well. Savannah will absolutely not let this opportunity slip away. While I calmly sat in the office, taking no action to stop her. Because I couldn't wait for her to snatch this project away. Just as expected, the people I sent to monitor Savannah and Lucas brought back news. They said that Savannah confidently urged Lucas to come up with enough funds, along with her entire life savings, to buy the patent for this product. Lucas absolutely did not believe this brainless fool could make any contribution and completely disagreed. Savannah grew anxious. She had been reborn and knew how lucrative this product would become in the future. Gritting her teeth, she secretly asked her family for the money behind Lucas's back. Hearing that she had taken the bait, I smiled with pleasure. Savannah, the real show is just beginning. On the day that product went up for competitive auction, I was there too. Lucas brought Savannah with him, while I went alone. When Savannah saw me, she looked me up and down and sneered, "Serena, I bet it's been rough living with that cripple." I said with a placid expression, "You're overthinking it. Cassian is just fine. Every day, he goes out of his way to ask the kitchen to make all sorts of messy dishes for me. Apart from being mysterious lately and unclear about what he's up to, he's actually quite nice." Having lived with him for so many days, I've further confirmed that Cassian is not as simple as he appears on the surface. He seems to have been working on something important lately, not at all like the rumors circulating outside that he's on the verge of death and utterly useless. Although I don't know the reason why Cassian deliberately hides it from the other members of the Goo family, I won't expose him. Savannah looked completely unconvinced by what I said. "Would someone like that let you stay peacefully in the Goo family?" She sneered, "Don't tell me, sister, you didn't just get him into bed to smooth things over with him. Ha ha ha, it must be so hard for you to have to serve a cripple." Savannah laughed heartily, her eyes filled with gleeful schadenfreude directed at me. I knew exactly what she was thinking. Savannah had never been able to stand seeing me do better than her. Lucas frowned upon hearing Savannah's words. "Savannah, this is your sister." Savannah's expression turned cold. "What, just after getting a new lover, you still want to reminisce with an old flame?" Anger flashed across Lucas's face, but he indeed owed Savannah from their last encounter. His current company still relies on the Sioux family and Savannah, so he has no choice but to endure it. By looking at Lucas's expression, I could guess what this selfish husband from my past life was thinking. However, I couldn't be bothered to deal with him anymore. After this, I won't have to worry about it. Savannah smiled as she looked at me. "Sis, you really think you can secure this product smoothly?" "I'm telling you, I'm determined to get it." I calmly looked at her. "We'll each rely on our own abilities." At the auction, there weren't many bidders for this product. Although the product is certainly profitable, there are many better choices available. At this moment, many people couldn't see its potential. After one person offered $450,000, Savannah immediately raised the price. $550,000. With a sudden increase of $100,000, Savannah was determined to win it. I calmly raised my placard, $700,000. Savannah looked at me, a trace of ferocity flashing in her eyes. $800,000. By this time, Lucas had already taken Savannah's hand and was questioning whether she had lost her mind. $80,000 to buy a product patent with uncertain profitability. Their company has just started up, and their liquid assets are limited. I took a sip of tea. $90,000. Savannah gritted her teeth. $100,000. I continued to raise the price. At that point, only the two of us were competing in the field. The other people at the venue frowned. What were these two daughters of the Sioux family up to over such a small project? I calculated Savannah's limit and raised the bid several times. I only stopped when Savannah finally called out $1.68 million. I saw Savannah finally breathe a sigh of relief when I gave up on raising the bid. This is her limit, but it is not mine. I knew when to stop, calculating that Savannah had exhausted what little she had. Only upon leaving did it seem that Savannah and Lucas had a disagreement. Savannah kept insisting that Lucas should trust her. Lucas thinks she's practically insane. The Sioux family isn't exactly top-tier wealthy, and he himself comes from a very ordinary background. How could he stand Savannah squandering money like that? After the auction ended, I returned home in high spirits. As soon as I walked through the door, I saw Cassian sitting in the living room, speaking gravely with someone on the phone. I moved quietly, and Cassian didn't notice. Investigate. Find out everything about Mason's overseas businesses. This time, I won't leave him any room to maneuver. The man's voice was cold and ruthless, completely unlike the gentle tones he used when speaking to me. I saw Cassian clenching the watch tightly in his hand before hurling it away fiercely. The luxurious watch shattered into pieces in an instant. I was startled, and only then did Cassian realize I had returned. When he looked at me, the fury in Cassian's eyes had yet to fade. In the dim light of the living room, he looked like a demon sent from hell. At that moment, I finally understood why Savannah had cried and insisted on leaving the Goo family in her previous life. Yet as I approached, the violence in Cassian's gaze gradually turned to panic. "You're back? When did you come back?" "I just accidentally dropped the watch." "Are you okay? Did any of the fragments cut you?" He pretended to take my hand to check. But I hadn't yet shaken off the image from just moments ago and instinctively took a step back. I looked at him with a complicated expression, using my face to tell him that I had seen everything. I had no idea what I was about to face. But then Cassian suddenly started coughing violently, his pale face gradually turning flushed from the choking cough. "Serena, cough. I feel so sick." His peach blossom eyes gradually misted over, as Cassian pitifully said, "I'm not feeling well, I'm having an episode." Only then did I snap out of it, quickly rushing to the kitchen to get him a glass of water. After drinking half a glass of warm water, Cassian's breathing slowly steadied, and he gradually leaned into my embrace. "You heard everything, didn't you?" "Serena, I can explain, it's not what you think." I was somewhat dazed, my arms loosely encircling his waist as I wondered when we had become so intimate. But the next moment, I was pulled back by Cassian's cautious voice. "Mason is my brother, but he's actually my half-brother, the illegitimate son my father had outside the family in his younger years. But no one outside knows about it." He explained, "I suspect that the car accident back then was related to him. After investigating for a long time, I discovered that he was indeed behind it." "Serena, do you know? I just can't accept it. I simply can't forgive him." I patted his head gently with one hand and comforted him, saying, "You don't need to explain anything to me. You don't meddle too much in my career, and I won't gossip about your affairs either. Don't worry, if someone had ever harmed me to such an extent, I wouldn't be able to forgive them either." Thinking of Savannah, a chilling glint flickered in my eyes. At the same time, I felt a deeper understanding for Cassian in my arms, and there was even a faint sense of sharing the same kind of misfortune. "No, you don't know what I hate the most." Cassian shook his head. Suddenly, he furrowed his brow, his expression pained. I noticed something was wrong and quickly asked him what was happening. Cassian gasped for breath and pushed me away. "It's nothing, I'm fine." But Cassian clearly didn't look fine at all. I frowned and crouched down, trying to meet his eyes, but Cassian made every effort to avoid my gaze. I grew a bit angry. "Cassian." Only when he heard the anger in my voice did he reluctantly raise his head, his eyes filled with a pleading look. I just have a headache, it's fine, it's just an episode." Looking at his cautious eyes, I felt a sharp pang in my heart. What's more, deep within Cassian's eyes, I could see the affection he was desperately trying to hide from me. To be honest, he's not very good at hiding it. From what Savannah says, Cassian is no saint, he definitely doesn't treat her with such an attitude. But why is everything so different in this life? Cassian not only attended the engagement party but was also unexpectedly good to me. Have we met before? Or is there some connection I'm unaware of? I frowned, trying hard to recall, but I really couldn't think of any intersection between Cassian and me. To be honest, if I had ever met someone so remarkably brilliant, I wouldn't have forgotten. Cassian avoided eye contact and said, "And no, haven't we only met for the first time at our engagement party?" "You already know that." I remained skeptical, but Cassian pursed his lips, showing no intention of revealing anything. "Ah." I sighed, my fingers moving to Cassian's temples, gently massaging them for him. "I really don't know what to do with you." Cassian lowered his gaze, silent, just wrapping his arms around my waist and burying his face in my chest. Not long after Savannah photographed that biotech company's product, something happened. Changes in national policy, along with scandals being exposed in similar products, caused a sudden gap in the industry. Lucas Corp, holding the patent for this new product, immediately seized the opportunity and invested heavily in mass production. When I returned to the Sue family this week, I happened to run into Savannah. Savannah, with her meticulously crafted makeup, stood radiantly beside Lucas, one hand resting on her belly. Lucas was negotiating with my uncle, Savannah's father. You have seen the potential of this product now. I believe that with your investment, the company's future will be even brighter. Savannah also raised her eyebrows and said, "Yeah, Dad, hurry up and take out all our family's money. Let's invest all our liquid assets." I coughed twice and moved closer to the group. Savannah looked at me warily and asked, "What do you want?" "Let me tell you, Serena, I've secured this patent. Don't even think about it, I won't let your family take advantage of this." My uncle also knew that what my little sister was doing now was very profitable, and he smiled as he looked at me. "Serena, by rights we are all one family. As your uncle, I should include you, but since you married into the Gu family, you probably wouldn't care for such small gains." Savannah rolled her eyes and looked up. "Enough, Dad. Grandpa may say he favors me, but he's handed over all the family businesses to my uncle. Why are you still worrying about them?" Hearing her words, Grandpa finally couldn't sit still anymore. "You're such a fool." He clutched his chest, unable to understand how his most beloved granddaughter could be so foolish. He knew his own son well. Savannah's father simply wasn't the kind of person capable of upholding the family business. He had entrusted most of the family affairs to his younger son for management, yet he had never shortchanged the eldest son's share. As for his youngest granddaughter, he had indulged her even more. When Savannah said she wanted to marry into the Gu family, he immediately cancelled the eldest granddaughter's engagement. And when Savannah changed her mind and refused to marry, although he was dissatisfied, he still risked offending the Gu family to call off the engagement for her. Who would have thought that now? Savannah has only just seen a little benefit and is already turning on us without acknowledging past kindness. "You're just pretending to be decent, you old man, but in reality, you're still biased towards Serena." Savannah's eyes were filled with resentment, her mind flooded with the disappointment of being kicked out by Grandpa Sue in her previous life. However, I knew that at the time, after Grandpa kicked Savannah out, he trembled as he dug out the family's savings book and bank card. Tell me, Savannah has been spoiled since she was a child. Even after giving her some lessons recently, she still didn't learn. Forget it. Take this old man's retirement money and give it to her, so she can divorce that gambler as soon as possible. After that day, Savannah contacted me, saying she wanted to talk. I took the bank card with me, planning to give her the money when we met. Little did I know that before I even entered, Savannah had arranged to have me kidnapped. I watched the scene of the grandmother and granddaughter quarreling before me with a detached, expressionless gaze. At Savannah's instigation, the whole family moved out of the Sioux residence, as if intending to sever all ties with the Sioux family. She invested all her money into this project. I learned from my subordinates that Lucas actually wanted to set aside a portion of the funds as a precaution against unforeseen circumstances. But Savannah kept it from him, not only investing these funds but also secretly taking out loans. Then she eagerly waited for her money to double. Because she knew that in our previous life, her sister, me, had tripled the cost through this project. So she poured all her efforts into investing more money into it. She was unaware, however, that behind this product lay a significant hidden risk. Namely, the product's patent did not fully belong to that biotechnology company. The owner of that company had already fled abroad after the auction concluded. In my previous life, I had keenly uncovered this fact before the product entered large-scale production. They privately contacted relevant personnel to gain understanding and firmly secured all patent rights for the product in their own hands. They also learned that the product carried certain risks, and they hired the original research and development team to work day and night to patch up the vulnerabilities. This allowed them to avoid the risks and prevent any unfavorable incidents from occurring. At this point, Lucas was completely immersed in the joy of success, while Savannah took pride in her memories from her past life, believing that there was absolutely no possibility of any mistakes. The repercussions soon began to take root. Soon after the first batch of products from Lucchester Company Ltd. went into mass production and hit the market, Lucas and Savannah were sued by a group of people in court. The patent for this product was jointly developed in collaboration with a biotechnology company, but was sold off privately by that company. After investigation, it was found that 90% of the product patent rights should belong to the plaintiff. The transaction between the biological company and the couple, Savannah, was not legally recognized. The first batch of partners who purchased products from Gangster Company Ltd. have also filed complaints in anger. All the reagents produced using this product as a raw material appeared normal when first manufactured. However, after some time had passed, they all exhibited abnormal reactions and became unusable. Before the sale, Gangster Company Limited failed to properly control the performance of this product. These companies were originally in urgent need of finding alternatives, but who would have thought that Lucas, who seemed reliable, would cheat them so badly? More people banded together and began to sue the couple Lucas and Savannah. The production and sale of the product were forced to halt, but all the funds of Gangster Company Limited had already been fully invested. We also purchased a large quantity of raw materials and stockpiled them in the factory. Under pressure, Lucas sought out the actual owner of the product patent, attempting to negotiate and collaborate on improvements. However, those individuals firmly refused Lucas. Of course they wouldn't agree, because I had already contacted them beforehand. These people know that I have strong methods, and with the backing of Harrington Hall Holdings plc, they simply dare not offend me. Besides, the conditions I can offer are 10,000 times better than those of Savannah and the others. Watching Savannah and Lucas scrambling helplessly, I slowly curled my lips into a smile. In fact, for me, directly taking down Savannah and Lucas's failing company is not a problem at all. However, I'd much prefer to quietly watch Savannah reap what she sows. Let her use her arrogance and malice to send herself straight to hell. At another business dinner, holding a glass of red wine, I casually smiled and mingled with others. Suddenly, Savannah, her eyes bloodshot, and Lucas, clearly worn out, caught my eye. The two searched everywhere for investors, hoping to secure sponsorships to ease the pressure. Yet, no one was willing to get involved in this mess. I knew that Gangster Company Ltd. was now on the brink of bankruptcy, and the creditors to whom Savannah had applied for loans had also come knocking. But they were only able to step through this door because they were related to me, Cassian's fiancée. But Savannah evidently lacked self-awareness. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward with teary eyes. "You knew all along, didn't you?" Savannah grabbed my collar and angrily shouted. "Serena, you snake-hearted beast, you must have known all this. But you didn't tell me, just watched me jump into the fire pit." I grabbed her hand and threw it aside forcefully. "What sister? I am an only child. I don't have a sister like you." Savannah had already snapped. "Why? Why did you get to live a good life your whole lifetime, and now you refuse to let me have it this time?" Everyone around her thought she was rambling madly, only I understood what Savannah really meant by her words. I gently curved my eyes and smiled. "Why not? Savannah, haven't you succeeded in taking Lucas away from me? Disappointed that things didn't turn out the way you wanted? But have you ever thought that ending up in this situation has nothing to do with who you chose, but simply because?" I gently parted my lips. "You are you, and I am me." Savannah's eyes turned red as she raised her hand, wanting to slap me across the face. Before I could react, a hand reached out from beside me. Cassian, dressed in a suit, stood there with a chilling coldness in his eyes. But I widened my eyes, not for any other reason, but because Cassian was not in a wheelchair. He was standing. Had his legs healed? Cassian shook off Savannah's hand and said coldly, "Get out." I suddenly grabbed Cassian's hand, exclaiming with delight, "Your legs are better?" Cassian looked slightly embarrassed. "Yes, the treatment was very successful. Although not fully recovered yet, I can already get around without the wheelchair." Some time ago, when he mentioned going abroad for treatment, I hadn't held out much hope. Because in my previous life, I didn't hear the news of Cassian's recovery at this time. I never thought that expert could actually heal Cassian's leg. It seems that, by some twist of fate, it wasn't just my destiny that changed, but Cassian's too. I genuinely felt happy for Cassian and couldn't be bothered to deal with Savannah and the others for the moment. At this moment, Lucas stepped forward, his expression indescribable. "Serena. I'm sorry." His eyes were filled with pleading. "We've shared over a year of feelings. You can't just stand by and watch me like this. You loved me once, didn't you?" I gazed back at him coldly. Suddenly, Cassian blocked my line of sight. He frowned and took my hand. "Lucas, what do you want to say to my fiancé?" Lucas turned pale as he remembered that he had been the one to cheat first and had gotten Savannah pregnant. The more he thought about it, the more embarrassed Lucas became. All of it was Savannah's fault. That fool had landed him in this situation. Lucas glared deathly at Savannah, then turned and walked away, leaving her be. Seeing Lucas leave, Savannah looked somewhat panicked, yet she turned her gaze to me, an unwilling resentment rising on her face. She laughed maniacally a few times, pointed at me, and said, "Serena, don't think that just because you see me like this now, you can feel smug. Do you know why I don't want Cassian?" Savannah sneered, revealing a secret in front of everyone. "He's a madman, a psychopath. A mental illness that kills without medication. Serena, if you marry him, he'll kill you when he loses his mind. Ha 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 ha, you won't have good days. You deserve it." After exposing Cassian's secret in front of everyone, Savannah contentedly went to chase after Lucas. At that moment, the eyes of the guests in the hall were fixed on Cassian, however subtly. Is it true or false? I've never heard of it before. Cassian seems quite normal apart from being a bit sickly. TSK, I never expected this. Everyone's expressions were filled with suspicion, disgust, or pity. Only I knew that this matter was likely true. Because Cassian's hand was now ice cold. When I looked at him, his eyes were filled with panic and confusion. His grip on my hand weakened, slipping away in despair. I pressed my lips together and firmly grasped his wrist instead. "Let's go, let's leave this place," I signaled to him, leading him away. Cassian kept his eyes down the whole time, not daring to look at me, nor showing any reaction. When we got home, I turned on the light and asked Cassian to sit on the sofa. I brought a cup of warm water from the kitchen and gently placed it in front of him. "Tell me, when did it start?" "I've had it since I was very young." Cassian lowered his head and answered softly. "Are you taking any medication? Is it effective?" I continued to ask. "Yes, there's a special medicine." "Is the side effect just a headache?" I frowned, recalling the pain Cassian was in that day. "MHM." I remained silent for a long time, staring at the person before me. After a long while without hearing my next question, Cassian anxiously looked up and tugged at the hem of my clothes. He didn't dare to touch my hand again. "My condition is very manageable," Cassian pleaded softly. "Please don't abandon me. I'm actively undergoing treatment and will recover." I continued to stay silent. Cassian stared into my eyes, and the hope and anticipation in his gaze gradually dimmed. Until I asked, "Cassian? Is that you?" In my memory, the image of that boy in the hospital gown, thin and frail, gradually comes into focus. That was when I was in junior high school, and I often ran into a little boy near my home. At that time, the Sue family didn't have the conditions they do now and lived in the suburbs next to a children's mental health treatment center. There, many children with psychological issues from a young age resided. One day, as I passed by, I encountered a little boy silently crouching by the doorway and went up to ask him, "Why are you alone here?" The boy looked up, his eyes red and swollen from crying. "I miss Mom and Dad." "Where are they?" The boy replied, "Dad has a new son, Mom argued with him, and I don't know where she went." As I listened, I thought his parents had divorced, his father had remarried a stepmother, and they had a new child. So they left the little boy with mental issues here to fend for himself. I felt heartbroken and patted his head, then took out a piece of candy. "Here's some candy for you. My home is just over there. From now on, I'll come out to play with you after school every day." From that day on, every afternoon, he would stand by the door. As soon as he spotted me returning from school in the distance, he would wave to me energetically. Cassian also became a special friend of mine during my junior high school years. Until one day, when I went to look for him, the staff at the institution said that he had been taken away by his family. Soon after, my family also moved, and I never saw him again. Little did I expect that Cassian back then would turn out to be the Cassian I know now. Because so much time had passed, I couldn't immediately connect the two of them. It wasn't until today, when Savannah publicly revealed Cassian's secret, that I noticed the shift in Cassian's expression. It was only then, in this handsome young man, that I caught a glimpse of the once weak and helpless shadow. "It's me," Cassian said, raising his reddened eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave without saying goodbye back then. It's just that." Cassian told me about the hardships he's endured over the years. After he was diagnosed with a mental condition as a child, his father was deeply disappointed. Not long after, Cassian's father brought home a boy from outside, 2 years older than Cassian. As soon as Cassian's mother saw the situation, she understood everything clearly. She had a huge fight with Cassian's dad and went abroad. But they didn't get divorced. The marriage between them simply couldn't be dictated by personal preferences. After his mother left, Cassian was also sent to a children's mental health center. On the surface, it was for treatment, but anyone with clear eyes knew he had become a pawn to be discarded. From a young age, Cassian understood the callousness of his parents and learned firsthand the taste of abandonment. At the treatment center, he pretended to be positive and cheerful every day. Gradually, someone informed his mother, telling her that he was recovering well. Cassian got his wish and was taken away, eventually going abroad to study. However, he didn't get a chance to say goodbye to his sister. When Cassian first returned to the country, he had no intention of seeking revenge against Mason and his mother. He simply wanted to reclaim what was rightfully his identity as the legitimate heir of the Gu family. However, Mason had no plans to let things go. Instead, he secretly manipulated events, orchestrating a car accident in an attempt to silence Cassian forever. Unexpectedly, Cassian was incredibly lucky. He didn't die, only broke a leg. Over these years, Cassian has been feigning illness on the surface, pretending to be too weak to enter the company. In reality, however, he has been gradually expanding his influence, preparing to deliver a fatal blow to Mason at the peak of his pride. The banquet hosted by the Gu family is tomorrow night. Would you like to attend with me and witness this moment? Cassian looked up, his eyes filled with anticipation as he gazed at me. I laughed. Of course. The following night at the banquet, a group of police officers rushed into the hall and took Mason away for investigation. Prior to that, he had still been acting like the eldest son of the Gu family, mingling with people everywhere. When Cassian and I went to the police station to testify, Mason was still looking impatient while being questioned by the police. When can I go back? My lawyer? Officers, I've always followed the law. There's no reason for you to arrest me. It couldn't be that someone has made some false statements to frame me, could it? It wasn't until Cassian stood upright in front of him that Mason's indifferent expression slowly tensed up. It's you? He looked utterly incredulous. So it was you who reported me. Cassian, you really put on a convincing act. Cassian didn't even spare him a glance. He simply took out a thick stack of documents and placed them before the police. Here are supplementary pieces of evidence. Mason's tax loopholes in business operations, illegal projects, and other facts of criminal conduct. Only then did he glance at Mason. All evidence is conclusive. Mason clenched his molars tightly. You. Good job, Cassian. Do you think that by sending me in, the Gu family will fall right into your hands? I'm telling you, this is a case of killing 1,000 enemies at the cost of 800 of your own. Let's see how you explain this to the family. Cassian calmly wiped his fingers. I removed a tumor from the Gu family. My father and grandfather are grateful to me. How could they possibly hold me accountable? Mason's face gradually turned pale. Now, all the misdeeds he had committed were coming to light. Even if some of those matters had nothing to do with him and were originally issues within the Gu family. But now, in comparison to the greater interests of the group, a mere illegitimate son, any rational person would know who to choose. Mason quickly realized he had become a pawn to be sacrificed. After handing over the evidence with Cassian, I left the police station. Without bothering about Mason, who was slamming the table in frustration behind me. With Cassian's situation settled, my own affairs were also progressing smoothly. Savannah, as in her previous life, was desperate and had debt collectors coming to her door. She once again went to the Sue family to plead, weeping bitterly before Mr. Sue. However, her past ruthlessness and the actions of my uncle had completely chilled the old man's heart. Although he still cherished family ties, as a businessman, what he cared about most was his own interests. Savannah was thrown out the door, dazedly searching for Lucas. But Lucas threw a divorce certificate at her. His remaining assets had long been transferred overseas. As it turned out, this man had never been completely open with Savannah from the start. Savannah shouldered most of the blame and was saddled with massive debt. Especially since she was likely facing the prospect of imprisonment. And I'm more than happy to go with the flow and give her a push. As for Lucas, I won't let him off either. A set of evidence for reporting has already been compiled and is ready to be submitted. It will be delivered punctually to the tax office as soon as Monday rolls around. It's funny, but the inspiration actually came from Cassian. However, even as everything has settled down, things at home have felt a bit strange lately. Specifically, Cassian's face flushed bright red several times when he saw me. He even stuttered when he spoke. I was wondering when Cassian had developed a stuttering problem. But one day after returning home from work, I saw the entire house decorated in a romantic yet somewhat tacky fashion. The man, dressed in a formal suit, held a ring in his hand and still struggled with his words. "Serena, would you agree to my proposal of becoming husband and wife?" Lately, Cassian's odd behavior has finally started to make sense. So he had this up his sleeve all along. I could hardly tell whether to laugh or cry. Silly, didn't I already say yes to you long ago? A year later, I married Cassian. During our honeymoon, we happened to encounter the police cracking down on a serial robbery case. The ringleader turned out to be Liam, the one who had kidnapped me in my previous life. A year later, Serena and Cassian held a grand wedding at the ancient Harrington Hall estate. On the wedding day, a light drizzle fell in London, yet it did not dampen the guests' spirits. Almost the entire British business elite was in attendance. Walter from Clarendon Gate Capital personally presented a painting worth 8 figures, while leaders from several established aristocratic financial groups raised their glasses to toast the young couple. At the same time, the remnants of Luchester Company were completely liquidated. Savannah spent her 30th birthday behind bars. She was sentenced to 8 years in prison on multiple charges, including fraud, malicious debt acquisition, and inciting false litigation. The child was taken by a welfare agency after being born prematurely in prison, and she wasn't even allowed to hold it once. That day, through the glass of the prison visitation room, she saw her former best friends reposting photos of Serena and Cassian's wedding on social media, captioned, "The most dazzling new queen of the business world and her prince consort." She lost control, screaming and smashing the microphone. Even as she was dragged away by the guards, she kept howling, "That should have been me." Lucas's fate was even worse. His assets transferred overseas had already been frozen by Interpol at the request of Harrington Hall Holdings' legal team. He attempted to flee to South America but was extradited back to the country at the airport, charged with multiple felonies including tax fraud, embezzlement, and bribery, ultimately sentenced to 12 years. On the day of the trial, he wore a rumpled suit, his hair graying, and kept his head down, not daring to look at anyone. When leaving the courtroom, a reporter asked if he regretted it. He suddenly broke down in tears. "I regret not seeing sooner that Savannah was nothing but a complete cancer. If it weren't for her, I wouldn't have come to this." Their divorce battle was a spectacularly ugly affair. Savannah shifted all the blame onto Lucas, who in turn publicly released recordings of all the schemes Savannah had planned after her rebirth, insurance he had secretly recorded during his darkest moments at the company. As soon as the recordings came to light, the entire upper-class circle exploded. It turned out that the pitiful pregnant woman who had always feigned innocence had known about all the traps in advance, yet deliberately walked into them, dragging her husband down with her. Savannah went from being seen as a victim to becoming the very epithet of a vicious, deranged woman, with no one left to pity her. What made it even more satisfying was that Serena didn't personally deliver the final blow. She merely anonymously submitted to the relevant authorities the evidence of Savannah's incitement of Liam to kidnap her that year, along with the financial misconduct of Lucchester Company. Everything was legal and compliant, yet precisely lethal. 5 years later, Yorkshire Sovereign Ventures successfully listed on the main market of the London Stock Exchange, with its market value soaring into the FTSE 100. Serena graced the cover of the Financial Times and was hailed as the new queen of British business. In the same year, under Cassian's full leadership, Harrington Hall Holdings completed the acquisition of several century-old corporate groups, becoming the undisputed industry leader. Meanwhile, in prison, Savannah was granted parole a year early for good behavior, only to find herself with nowhere to go. The Sue family had long severed ties with her, and her former friends kept their distance. With her hair in disarray, she stood at the street corner opposite Yorkshire Sovereign Ventures building, gazing at the massive LED screen atop the skyscraper. On it, Serena and Cassian were shown attending a charity gala with their pair of twins, the footage playing on a loop. She suddenly dashed forward, wanting to scream across the street at the building, only to be politely but coldly escorted away by security. At that moment, she finally understood, she had lost utterly, not even qualifying for the right to hate. Upon returning from their honeymoon, Serena and Cassian watched the news in the private cinema at Harrington Hall. Seeing Liam and his gang sentenced to life imprisonment, as well as the latest verdicts for Savannah and Lucas, they exchanged a knowing smile. Cassian held his wife close and whispered, "Darling, it's all over now." Serena leaned against his shoulder and replied softly, "No, it's only just beginning, our era is here." Outside the window, the London fog gradually cleared, and the sky brightened with daylight.